Did you build it? Why would I build this? I don't know. Why would there be a door in someone's floor? Natalie's bedroom was small and quaint, the smallest in the house, and that's why she chose it. She thought of this tiny room as her own little cave where she could hide away from the world. She kept everything neat and tidy. Her bed was always made, her toys were put away, and her hamper was in her closet so people couldn't see her dirty laundry. This tiny place had been her small, untouched sanctuary for 2 years, but now her safe space had been violated by this intruder. "What do you think is behind it?" Peter asked. "Well, my room is over the kitchen," Natalie said, "but when I went downstairs to find the other side of the door, there was nothing up on the ceiling." "Weird," Peter punctiliously commented. The door laid in the corner of Natalie's bedroom, embedded in the green carpet. She first noticed it when she woke up for school that morning. The sudden appearance of the door frightened her, so she brought her parents up to investigate. Natalie waited outside as they walked into her room. She was anticipating to hear a passionate gasp of horror from her mother or a confused storm of curses from her father, but after a moment, her parents came out of the room and berated her for pulling such a dumb joke. "There was no door," her father hissed at her. Whenever Natalie's father got nasty, his giant stature made the young girl feel small and wrong. They then left her to get ready for school. She began to doubt what she had seen. Had she made it all up? She then theorized that it could have been a hallucinatory spell caused by a lack of sleep, but when Natalie re-entered her room, she was once again greeted by the door, laying in the same spot where she said it was. "Maybe it leads inside the walls," Natalie suggested. "What's with this lock?" Peter asked. He then kicked a large padlock on top of the door. They were familiar with the small combination locks used for their school lockers, but this thing was almost 4 times the size of one of those. Peter picked up the lock, having to use both hands to lift it, but even then, he could only raise it a few inches from where it laid. Where most locks had a keyhole on the bottom of their body, there was none on this one. There was no keyhole on the bottom, sides, top, front, or back. It was a plain block of metal. Finally, the strength in Peter's hands gave out and he dropped the thing. "This is weird," Peter commented. Natalie grew unimpressed with the boy's observations. She put a foot down on the door and gently applied her weight onto it. The door bowed inward and gave out a little creak. She sat down next to the door, confused and angry. Peter sat beside her, as he didn't want to be the only one standing. "Why can't my parents see this thing, but you can?" Natalie asked Peter. "Maybe it doesn't want to be seen by them," Peter said. She sat with her legs pressed up against her chest, her arms resting upon her knees, and her head cradled in her arms. She turned to Peter. "We should bring someone else here, but we don't tell them about the door. Just invite them over and see if they notice it." "My little brother," Peter said, jumping up excitedly. "My mom is always trying to make me hang out with him, so he'll be perfect for this." Peter went home to fetch his little brother, Henry. The boys returned to the house around 6, after Natalie's family were finished with dinner. Once the boys had arrived, Natalie introduced the two to her parents and said they would be up in her room playing board games. There was a thickness in the air, experienced only by the 2 older kids. But Henry, filled with excitement finally being allowed to hang out with his older brother, didn't notice. Walking into Natalie's room, the little boy looked around and began to soak in the new environment. After searching around for only a moment, Henry innocently asked, "Why do you have a door on your floor?" Natalie grabbed Henry by the shoulders and began to shake him. "You can see the door too? Oh, Henry, you beautiful boy!" She screamed in his face. Henry was terrified by the small assault being inflicted on him. Peter saw his little brother was about to start crying, so he quickly separated the two. They then explained the situation to the young boy, emphasizing the importance of his sighting. Natalie began devising an elaborate plan to bring even more people over to the house. She would bring everybody from her class, then the teachers, the janitor, the office secretary, the police, and the firefighters. If anyone saw the door, maybe the story would get out and the president, with all his generals and scientists, would come to check it out. A small knock rapped from the mysterious door, breaking the anxious girl's speeding thoughts. Natalie walked towards the origin of the sound. She knelt and gave her own knock back in response. 2 knocks rapped back. This began a game where Natalie would knock in a certain pattern, and something behind the door would reply with its own rhythm. After a while of this back and forth, the knocking stopped. Natalie laid her head down, ear against the door, and listened. "I'm cold." A light voice squeaked out between the boards of the door. Natalie recoiled in surprise and looked back at the boys behind her. They looked rattled, having heard the voice as well. Natalie crawled back to the door and called out, "Hello? Who's down there?" "I'm so cold," the voice came again. "Please, let me out so I can warm up. I'm so scared." A surge of sadness washed over Natalie. She felt an urgency grow within her, a need to free whoever was behind the door. She could feel tears begin to well up behind her eyes. She turned back to the boys and said, "My dad has bolt cutters in the basement." She crept down the stairs, tiptoeing down to the basement and retrieved the cutters. She remained as quiet as possible as not to arouse the suspicion of her parents watching TV in the living room. Together, Natalie and Peter grabbed each handle of the bolt cutters and pushed inward. They sweated and gritted their teeth, and after a minute of pushing, they were finally able to cut through the thick shackle of the lock. The door was opened, but it didn't reveal the inside of the floors like Natalie thought. Instead, there was a stone stairway which led straight down, disappearing into a dark abyss. She called out to whoever was down the stairs. "I'm cold. Can someone come down and bring me a blanket?" the light young voice asked from the depths. "Why don't you come up?" Natalie asked. "You wanted us to free you." There was no response. The room was silent, waiting for someone to come up the stairs. But instead, the voice came forward once again. "I want to show you my room." With this, the feeling of sadness, which had once overwhelmed and motivated her to free whatever this thing was, vanished, now replaced with absolute fear. A fear that manifests deep down within a person's soul, screaming at the rest of the system that this is wrong. Get away. Survive. Natalie slowly stepped back. It was a horrible idea to break that lock, she told herself. She made it back to where the boys were and looked over to see little Henry hiding behind his older brother. The boy gripped at his brother's jeans with tears streaming down his cheeks and gave out little unsteady breaths. When she looked up at Peter, he was staring at the open doorway, mesmerized. It looked like a thunderbolt had struck him. His mouth was open and his breathing was slow and deep. He grabbed a hold of his little brother's hand and said, "Come on, Henry." He began to drag the terrified little boy behind him towards the door. Henry was begging not to be taken down the stairs. In vain, he tried to dig his heels into the carpet, but he was no match for his brother, who was twice his size. Henry looked back at Natalie, calling for help. "Please stop him! I don't want to go down there! Please stop him!" But Natalie was unable to do anything. Something held her in a vice grip, forcing her to watch as her friend and terrified little brother disappeared down the stairs. Finally, the two were gone. The cries of the little boy ceased, but the mystical hold on Natalie remained, and it slowly beckoned her forward. She looked down the stairs and, from far down, felt something staring back up at her, preying on her. "Wow, it's so nice down here," Peter's voice echoed from below. "I love it here," Henry's voice said after that. Natalie called out to the boys and asked what was down there. Peter replied, "So many wonderful things. You should come down so you can see it all. It is cold though, so make sure to bring a blanket." A breeze from below spidered up to Natalie and danced around her legs. Her breath was visible. The tears that ran down her cheeks slowed as they crystallized. Her foot fell down onto the first stone step. We're going to have so much fun," Peter, Henry, and the young light voice all said together. Natalie's soul was finally able to scream out through her, throwing her back from the door to her floor. Screaming in absolute terror, she crawled into the fetal position. Natalie's parents ran up the stairs at the sound of their daughter's howls of horror, finding her in hysterics. She was incoherent, only able to spit out, "Peter," and "Henry," then screaming, "The door!" Natalie's mother held the broken girl in her arms in an attempt to comfort her, slowly swaying her back and forth like she was a baby again. Her father asked, "Natalie, why do you have my bolt cutters up here? Did you hurt yourself with them?" Natalie then realized they still couldn't see the door. A fury burst out of her. She broke away from her mother's embrace and yelled at them. Why didn't they come up when Henry was screaming? They saw the boys come up with her and now they were gone. Why would she be so terrified of her own practical joke? Her father was dumbstruck by his daughter's rage. Natalie pointed to the corner where the door was, only to see nothing. No door and no broken lock. The only thing which remained were the bolt cutters and Henry's drag marks on the carpet.